After you've beaten the main story campaign in Monster Hunter Wilds and you head on over to high rank, well, congratulations, you've beaten the tutorial and the true game opens up. Whilst it's not the end of the main quest line, you do still have your assignments and progression. It's mostly around increasing your hunter rank and getting you geared up for the endgame activities. It should be completely redundant to say, but just on the off chance it's not very obvious, I will be talking about endgame. You will encounter various spoilers just by the very nature of things, so if you haven't quite gotten through yet, maybe come back to this video later. But if you're through the main story campaign and you're cracking on with your high rank quests, then you're probably in the right place. The endgame system we're going to be exploring today is the Artian Weapons system, which are customized weapons made from 3 separate components, allowing you to craft exactly the sort of weapon you want to make, and even the ability to level them up 5 times to draw out their full power. They're incredibly strong and have the best weapon decoration slots available in the current launch game. Of course, we need to head over to Gemma in order to forge these, but where do we get the components from in the first place? Let's dive into that. Once you unlock the ability to take on tempered monsters, for the most part they will be dropping weapon fragments as their quest rewards. They're called damaged weapon shards, and the reason tempered monsters will mostly give these as their rewards is to keep the tempered hunts very purposeful, so that you know tempered equals damaged weapon shards. These will appraise at the end of the hunt into random Artian weapon components, of which you will be using 3 different ones to create your different weapons. For the lower tier tempered monsters, you will get these rarity 5 damaged weapon shards, which show up as the grey icons, and you'll need to be HR 21 or higher. Think tempered monsters like Chatacabra, Chemetry, stuff like that. Even though the damaged weapon shards are rarity 5, these will give you rarity 6 Artian weapon components, which at the time that you can make them are incredibly powerful. The tier of tempered monsters up from that will then give you these pink rusted weapon shards, which appear as rarity 6 but then give you rarity 7 Artian weapon components, and include monsters like Ajarakans, Doshagumas, the absolute menaces like that. These are only available and will show up from HR 31 and above, so you're going to have to keep cracking through your HR quest line, whilst also bumping up your HR by just going out and fighting stuff, which is primarily what the quests are asking you to do anyway. And finally, we have the most powerful ones, the ancient weapon fragments at rarity 7, which will appraise to rarity 8 Artian weapon fragments. These are a distinct red in colour and will be dropping from the big boy tempered monster quests. So we're talking about the tempered apexes, Raydao, Uthduna, Jindahad and New Udra, and tempered Arkveld and Gore Magala as well. Basically the prime ass whoopers. For these you will need to be HR 41 and higher, and to have completed all of the assignments that are available. There is still some stuff that unlocks, like with HR 100 your decorations melding, but for the most part all launch content is HR 40 plus. So we've gone out, we've taken down a tempered Gore Magala, maybe a tempered Uthduna as well, gotten ourselves a bunch of ancient weapon fragments, which have appraised to those rarity 8 weapon components. Let's go forge an Artian weapon with amazing midriff Gemma. But just before we do that, it is also worth mentioning that you can actually meld these individual weapon components. By speaking to the melder at Suja, you can select the option to meld relics. The ancient weapon fragments giving you the rarity 8 weapon components cost 80 melding points. And as you can see, these Wyverian bloodstones that you get as you're playing through the game naturally aren't a super common drop that I have loads and loads of. Certainly not to the capacity of easily getting 80 melding points here and there whenever you want. You are also able to convert your appraised Artian materials towards melding points for making the ancient weapon fragment, the rarity 8 ones providing 16 points apiece. So if you absolutely have components which you know you're not going to use, for example you never want to use sleep, then I guess you could use them for this. But for now, I think melding the ancient weapon fragments isn't really the way to go. Just go fight more stuff. All the components you've received will be a mixture of tubes, blades, discs and devices. You can forge an Artian weapon for any of the 14 weapon types. They will just use a different combination of those 3 components. For example, for sword and shield over here, it takes a blade, a tube and a disc. You cannot mix and match rarities, you have to stay within the bracket, and every single individual Artian material will have an allocated element type, including status effects, and an Artian bonus out of attack infusion or affinity infusion. I've set my damage values to not show with the coefficient in the settings, so it will show the same for for all of the different weapons here. The base Rarity 8 Artian weapon comes in at 190 attack and 5% affinity. It goes up to white sharpness with 3 level 3 deco slots. We know that each individual Artian material has an affinity or an attack infusion, adding 5 attack or 5% affinity to the overall weapon. You need to have at least 2 of the same element type to add that element or status effect to the weapon. If you use 3 different ones, it will remain elementless, and if you use 3 of the same, it'll add more than if you use 2. Given the current state of the game, it is very beneficial to use elements or status effects over going pure raw. I would highly recommend, if you are able to craft one with 3 of the same. If right now you don't have the right elemental components to do all 3, it's perfectly fine to make one with 2 and then come back again later and do another. It's also fine to just wait until you get 3. Here I've made a triple paralysis sword and shield with 2 affinity infusions and 1 attack infusion, bringing it up to 195 attack and 15% affinity with 80 paralysis on it. There's no hard and fast right answer over whether attack infusions are better or affinity infusions are better. There's pros and cons for both. Certain things proc during critical strikes, but overall base damage is just absolutely amazing at all times. You've got the freedom to explore here, there's no wrong answers. We've just made a really awesome, powerful Artian weapon, which is phenomenal as it is. But it doesn't end there, you are able to upgrade them 5 times. Below the option to forge Artian weapons is the one to reinforce / dismantle them. The higher the rarity of the Artian weapon that you've made, the more reinforcement points it costs to level them up. For the Rarity 8 weapons, it's 3000 points per level. And then we see some specific reinforcement materials here, used exclusively for the upgrading of Artian weapons. The highest grade material being the Auricalcite, giving 300 reinforcement points, meaning that we would need 10 per level and 50 for all 5 levels. So just before we go ahead with this reinforcement, how do we go about getting these materials? I am glad you asked. Over at the Azuz Forge in the Oil Well Basin, there's an NPC called Rokul who you can speak to, who gives you access to the Smelting Foundry. By selecting the bottom option Festival Shares, you're able to collect the Artian reinforcement materials for free, which will accumulate more so over time. The longer you wait to check back, the more you'll have to get. Here I received 8 Auricalcite for free, nearly a whole level. And after you're done bumming freebies, your next option is the middle one to smelt ore. You don't really have any reason not to smelt the Auricalcite, so yeah, you can use the auto smelt, but I would just select Auricalcite. Here you can see that each individual Auricalcite requires 300 smelting points, which you achieve by adding in all of your monster parts here. Most of your high rank stuff is giving you around 30 points apiece, so you'd need 10 of those to make 1 ore. But as you start looking at the Guardian monsters and the Apexes, particularly when we're talking about the gems here as well, the points do go way up. You can get 500 points, 800 points, etc. It's still going to be a while before you can freely do this without worrying about using up your materials, but the idea isn't that you're going to be frequently doing level 5 Artian weapons constantly. But either way, after a certain point, you're at certain gear. You can go out of your way to take down a Blangonga, for example, which gives you 50 points apiece, exclusively for smelting some Auricalcite. You need to get 50 of them in total, and it's an option that you have. So now that we know how to get the Artian reinforcement materials, let's head back and actually reinforce our weapon. With the combination of materials that I currently have, I'm able to cleanly get 4 levels out of this. The reinforcement bonuses that you can get are random out of a few picks. Here I got 1 attack boost and 3 affinity boosts, plus 5 for each of them. But you can also get an elemental or status increase, and a large boost to sharpness as well. So I'm actually not super happy with the affinity boosts here. I would have much preferred to get the paralysis bumped up a load, but more affinity also means that level 3 critical status can proc more often, so swings and roundabouts. You're also able to dismantle Artian weapons that you've crafted, returning all of the resources that you've invested into upgrading them, and then 1 small additional bonus depending on the rarity. What's great about this is that you can go through the different rarity levels of the Artian weapons from 6 to 7 up to 8 without wasting any of the components, because you'll just get them all back. I said wasting with air brackets IRL. I don't know if that was conveyed in my tone. So in a sense, you're also able to re-roll these. Let's say I really wasn't happy with those 3 affinity rolls that I got on the Paralysis Sword and Shield. I could dismantle it and get all that Orichalcite back. I wouldn't get the individual Artian materials to craft the weapon back, so those 3 Paralysis weapon components are gone, but it's basically a chance to re-roll the whole thing. In terms of what reinforcement bonuses are best, it's pretty subjective, and I know I'm sounding like, oh, I got a really bad thing. I didn't. High affinity is amazing on weapons. It's just that I know that the sharpness bonus is really strong. It's worth like 3 levels of handicraft, and of course boosting the elemental or status power is really good as well. So in a perfect world, I would have had a more even spread, 1 sharpness boost, a mix of attack and affinity, and some elemental boosted as well. That would have been my perfect roll for reinforcement bonuses. But as we can see here, this isn't the end. Now we know what we have to do. If we want to go out and get more of the highest tier of weapon fragments, we've got to face off against Tempered Apexes and the Tempered Big Boys Arkveld and Gormagala, gather up those Artian weapon materials and hope that we get the drops that we're looking for. Or if we don't, exploring something else, maybe try a different status effect or element. This guide contains absolutely everything that you need to know about Artian weapons, where to get the weapon fragments, where to get the upgrade materials, what this all looks like, and the entire process through crafting them as well. And now all that's left is for you to get out there and start grinding that endgame. When it comes to endgame, the other side of that coin is grinding for the level 3 decorations, including the split decorations, which I'm going to be doing a dedicated video for really soon. I just really wanted to give you folks the tools to create some of the most powerful, fun weapons in the game. Hopefully this was useful and entertaining, and preferably both. If you did enjoy it, you can join the 20% of returning viewers and subscribe for more Monster Hunter Wilds. If you've got any questions or you just got an absolute god roll on your Artian weapon, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I'm also trying to get to 10k followers on TikTok, which unlocks monetization for it. So if any of you folks are on there, you can drop me a follow. It's at LightItUpDan. The link's in the description. That'll be super helpful too. Either way, thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you in the Forbidden Lands.